All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast, talking New York Jets football as training camp is well underway. Joining me today, the guy who covers the Jets for Jets Wire, Gary Phillips is here. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Happy to be on.
I have to say, it's also nice. It's the first time I had somebody who else with the last name of Phillips on the podcast, so it's pretty cool.
Okay, I'm honored to be a first.
I'm honored to be talking to you right now, and it's going to be exciting to watch the Jets this year in training camp. Obviously, the Adam Gase regime was a bit of a letdown. We have Robert Saleh in as the new head coach, new regime. What's your impressions of what we seen out of the Robert Saleh run camp so far?
Well, it's just a totally different vibe around the team. I mean, he couldn't be any more different than Gase, and also it kind of seems like his coaching staff is really different than the coaching staff that was previously here. You know, Gase wasn't a big yeller or screamer or, cursor, but Greg Williams certainly was. So we're not seeing these rants, this fiery approach. It was just earlier this week that Saleh was talking about preaching accountability, preaching teaching moments opposed to penalizing guys or, taking punitive measures for mistakes on the football field. And I think you can just tell there's a lot more positivity. There's a lot more coaching and teaching. And there's this, kind of infectious, hopeful vibe around the team that all starts with him.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting comparison because we saw what happened in Giants camp earlier this week. We were talking the week of August 2nd here in there that they had the whole fight breakout and Joe Judge going to do push-ups, running laps, so on and so forth, sort of like something out of like the miracle of Herb Brooks. And they asked Robert Saleh about it, and he's like, hey, I don't believe in that stuff. I believe in teaching accountability as a team and not having to force it. I think that's the point you're trying to make there.
Yep, exactly. And, I'll give Joe Judge a little, benefit of the doubt with his approach there, because that was after a fight where his quarterback ends up on the bottom of a pile. So, you're going to be a little hot-headed and angry after that. So I understand maybe wanted to take that out on the guys. But when it comes to like football mistakes, Rex Ryan used to do penalty push-ups. Todd Bowles used to do penalty push-ups. I don't think we're going to see that with Robert Saleh leading the charge.
Yeah, I think one thing we obviously have to watch here for the Jets is obviously the development of Zach Wilson. I mean, the reports out of the mini camps where he looked really good and look at rookie. He's had his ups and downs in training camp so far. What do you think about what we've seen out of Wilson to date?
He seems like a pretty easy passer. It seems like he's got a really good grasp of the offense, as good as you can as a rookie, only a couple practices into training camp. There's definitely a connection there with Elijah Moore, his fellow draft mate. So that's going to be huge, I think, for this offense in 2021. And, it seems like he's just doing all the right things off the field. You've had Mike LaFleur, Saleh, both talk about his crazy study habits and his film habits. So we're going to see pretty soon in the preseason and then the regular season how that plays out and how his talents translate to the NFL level. Because look, they don't have any other options to start. There's no veteran that's going to delay him taking the reins here.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that they did better for him than the Jets preseason did for Sam Darnold was they got him weapons. So I think obviously there's no like Julio Jones, like AJ Brown top receiver here, but there's a deeper group compared to what Sam Darnold had. What do you think about the depth of this receiving room?
Not just the receiving room, but even the running backs, the offensive line. It's probably as deep an offense as we've seen in a few years now. I mean, like you said, there's no superstars there, but you bring in receivers like Corey Davis, like Elijah Moore, like even Keelan Cole, who's very versatile, can play on the inside and the outside. You invest significant draft capital in Elijah Tucker. You bring in Morgan Moses. As far as your running back room goes, this LaFleur offense is going to be based on committee, but you got Michael Carter, who you drafted pretty high. You brought in a veteran like Kevin Coleman to show these guys the ropes. So it's definitely a way deeper unit than we've seen in a while.
Yeah, I think I like the fact that it's deep, and I don't get me wrong, I'd love for them to see them get that top guy eventually, but I think back to the early games of last season when the Jets had all the receivers, they're running out guys like Lawrence Cager and Josh Malone catching passes. Now you shouldn't have that problem this year.
No, and like you look at the depth, like I said, a guy like Cole might not jump out at you, but I think he's going to make an impact this year. You've got even Braxton Berrios, who seems to have a nice rapport with Wilson early, and that relationship. Denzel Mims, last year's second-round pick, he's been seeing some action with the second and third teams, which isn't exactly what you hoped for him going into his second year, but that also kind of just speaks to the depth that the Jets have here.
Yeah, I think also the line is very important for them because there's been a multi-year rebuild in progress here. I mean, they do have a solid left side. You figure Connor McDermott's going to be better in the new scheme. Morgan Moses at coup. What do you got the strength of the line right now for the Jets?
It just looks so much more improved than it ever did under Sam Darnold. And, we'll find out this year in Carolina how much of his struggles were his own fault versus the fault of the team and the pieces that were put around him. But, keeping the focus on this current team and this current quarterback, Zach Wilson, he's in a better position than Darnold ever was. And he's got a strong offensive line. He's got, a plethora of weapons. So they're going to keep him upright. They're going to give him targets. Let's see how quickly he can adjust to the NFL level.
Absolutely. I think the unit on the team, I think actually is going to be in the best shape is the defense because they have so much talent up front. They have a new scheme from Robert Saleh. What do you think about the new defense they're going to implement here?
Well, I'm really excited to see Carl Lawson, get in some game action. He's been the talk of training camp more than Wilson even, which is pretty surprising when you have a rookie quarterback, especially with the Jets. I mean, he's beaten Mekhi Becton left and right. He's blown every coach and every teammate away. So I'm really excited to see him. But just in general, I think you're going to see a lot of improvement from some of the incumbents. Guys like Quinnen Williams, I think, are going to build on his career year in this new defense. I think you're going to see somebody like Jared Davis, who kind of fell out of favor in Detroit. He's going to be a much better fit here. I think guys like Rankins, John Franklin Myers, they're going to thrive under Saleh, but also Jeff Ulbrich in this defense.
Yeah, I think one guy also gets forgotten about. This will be a huge deal. He comes back. Is C.J. Mosley being back in his defense because he was one of the best linebackers in football before he got hurt his first year at the Jets. He didn't play last year because he opted out, but him coming in the middle of the defense will also be huge.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what he's going to look like, how he's going to perform. Like you said, one of the better linebackers in the NFL before he essentially misses 2 seasons. He's got a totally different body type now that he's back, in the building. He's being asked to play a different defense, a different scheme. So we're going to see how he adjusts, but he definitely sounds and looks motivated thus far.
Yeah, one thing also that you're watching with the Jets, obviously, is the fact that they chose not to go get veteran help at the corner. Right now, the outside guys are Bless Austin and Bryce Hall, who are young, late-round picks. You have the other Michael Carter in the slot. There's a lot of youth there, so I feel like that's definitely a concern that they have to keep an eye on.
I think it definitely is, but just, going back to Saleh's approach, Saleh's philosophy, he's really big on, developing young guys and investing that time and actually giving them the chance to prove themselves and prove that the development is paying off, essentially. He kind of talked about that with the backup quarterbacks with James Morgan and Mike White as well. But, the Jets have invested time and resources and picks in these guys like Hall, like Bless Austin, like, the rookies that they drafted this year. They're going to get a chance for better or worse. And I think that also speaks to the organization realizing, this is not a win now year. 2021 is not a win now year. They expect to be competitive, but there's still going to be some growing pains and they're embracing them.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other interesting spot to watch for the Jets, and it's been a problem since Mike McCadney let Jason Myers walk after his Pro Bowl years, the kicking battle. I know they just cut Sam Ficken. They brought in Amendola to compete with Nagger. Do you think the kicker is currently on the roster? Do you think somebody's going to be shaking off and cut downs again?
I can never tell with the Jets and their kickers. For all I know, they'll have another 3 or 4 guys in that room before the regular season even starts. So we'll see how the preseason game goes and the green and white scrimmage goes. But it would never surprise me if the Jets bring in and cut some more kickers.
Yeah, I think the preseason is actually going to be a big help for them because they're trying to have so many battles, especially kicker, giving Wilson live reps. I think the preseason is going to be a bigger benefit for them than it's been in previous years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, even going back to the offensive line, you've got some new faces in there, but guys are going to have more of a chance to gel. Just the whole team as a whole is going to have more of a chance to gel, see what it's like to be in game situations with each other. That definitely was a hindrance last year. I know the offensive line spoke a lot about that last year, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact that has now.
Yeah, I think another thing in the preseason I think is interesting. This regime is doing that the Adam Gase one did not is they're scheduling some of these joint practicing with other teams. I always think it's a smart idea to get some exposure to teams outside of the preseason games. What do you think about that choice this year?
I like it because, again, you have a very young team, so it helps to expose them to some of the things they're going to see in the NFL. I think it also just adds a little intensity to practices in general, no matter how old your team is. You've got guys, teammates going up against each other day after day in practice. It gets a little stale. It gets a little old. It gets a little predictable. So I think particularly with a young team, with a young quarterback, it's going to make a huge difference. But it's also going to help the rest of the roster. It's going to help a coaching staff that is relatively inexperienced, and where a lot of coaches find themselves in new positions and new jobs. So I don't really see the downside to it.
Especially considering one of those is against Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers is there. It's something Zach Wilson's got to be sitting there like taking notes, watching how Rodgers prepares and runs his practice.
Right. That's got to be so helpful for him. Just, even if he gets 5 minutes alone just to talk to Rodgers, that could have a huge impact on him moving forward. So I think there's a lot of positives to it.
Absolutely. And obviously there's camp's been going on for a little bit. Like, based on what you've been hearing so far, who are some guys there, like, not on the top of mind for Jet fans who could be making some noise here?
Well, Moore has obviously been, one of the top talk of practices, but that's a little more on the nose. I thought it was pretty interesting that yesterday, when asked about the slot cornerback position, that Robert Saleh was asked directly about Javelin Guidry and Michael Carter too, and Saleh went out of his way to note Elijah Campbell was also in the running for playing time there. So that's a really interesting kind of dark horse candidate, if you will. So we'll see. We'll see if that continues throughout the summer, if he even makes the roster, but it kind of speaks to Saleh wanting to give everybody an opportunity, wanting to make sure that everybody understands, nothing's being handed to you. Everybody's competing for a job. And, that definitely speaks to the culture change around the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And this year, even with the expanded playoffs, at the extra game, nobody's expecting them to make the postseason. What do you think is a realistic expectation for this group? Because obviously they can't go 2-15. So what do you think is a realistic target for them?
I don't really have I haven't settled on a record or anything, like a record prediction. I try to avoid those more than anything. But my expectation, or I think if I were the Jets, a good, reasonable goal is to be competitive this year. I think they have the talent to do that, but you factor in the inexperience. They're probably going to lose some games here and there, probably some close ones at times. They'll be frustrating at times. But I think you're going to see a much more competitive football team, and I think that should be the goal for a team with such a young roster, a first-year head coach, a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable expectation because last year this team was getting blown out in the first half of games. You could honestly turn the game off when there was no shot they're coming back. So if they're in most of their games, I think that's a big step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
All right, Gary. Thanks all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I could be following on social media what you're doing for Jets Wire.
Yeah, so got stuff up at Jets Wire every day. You can find us along with the rest of the USA Today, NFL Wire sites, for any other teams you want to check out. And then I'm over on Twitter at Gary H. Phillips if you want to give me a follow.
All right, Gary. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.